Hi everybody. I'm Apollo. I am an peer wellness ambassador here at Reels Health Center, and we're stoked to see everybody. Thank you everybody for coming. I wanted to introduce our speaker. Please join me in welcoming a powerful voice for justice, joy, and transformation, Bella Bonner. Woo! Bella is a TEDx speaker, social entrepreneur, and the founder and executive director of Black Surf Santa Cruz, a nonprofit organization creating safe, joyful, and culturally affirming ocean spaces for Black and historically excluded communities. A proud graduate of Cabrillo College and San Jose State University, Bella brings a deep local roots, a background that spans from corporate tech recruiting to grassroots community organizing, and a fierce commitment to equity, liberation, and healing. She believes in being about that action and living your values as verbs, not just words. And she is here to remind us that the real change begins with how we care for ourselves and show up for one another. Please give me a warm welcome to Bella Bonner as she shares the ripple effect, healing ourselves and strengthening our communities.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining this conference. And thank you so much to Claudia and Apollo for organizing and inviting me to come speak with you all today. My name's Bella Bonner. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the founder and executive director for Black Surf Santa Cruz. One sec, we have clicker moment. Stop clicking. Here we go. So this is what you can expect from me today. I'm going to go a little bit more into who I am. So the title of this speech is The Ripple Effect, Healing Ourselves, Strengthening Our Communities. So we're going to move through 4 different levels. We're going to start at the individual level, which is why I'm going to start by introducing myself. And then we'll talk about communal, cultural, and systemic. And so the ways that healing and transforming our communities starts with that same internal transformation from within. I'll explain what the ripple effect is to me, and then we'll go through what the ripple effect looks like in action through the course of my personal life, and then also using Black Surf Santa Cruz as a mirror. And then we'll have a few minutes for Q&A for everyone if you have any questions. And so who am I? My name's Bella. I am a longtime Santa Cruz resident, social entrepreneur, TEDx speaker, and Cabrillo College alumni. Go Seahawks. I also went to San Jose State, but I don't know the mascot for them. So I'm a former recruiter for a tech company over the hill, and I'm currently the founder and executive director for Black Surf Santa Cruz. And I aim to always lead with my own personal values, which include justice, joy, courage, love, liberation, and education, which is why I was so excited to come back to Cabrillo and be able to talk here a little bit more about my experience and the ways that the ripple effect, I have watched it show up in my own life. And so you might be wondering, why am I here? How did I get here? And thank you to Apollo and Claudia. They reached out to me after watching my TEDx speech and were really excited to tell me about this conference and the theme of it in like thriving together and being in community. And one of the quotes from my TEDx speech had really resonated with them. And that quote is, "The changes that we dream of begin within ourselves, reflected in how we show up daily." And so today I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what that quote means to me and how I've seen it show up in my life post 2020. And so in 2020, a year that many of us want to forget, we're having clicker technical difficulties. But let me just go into like what this quote means a little bit to me. So back in 2020, I was working as a corporate recruiter in tech, and the pandemic, I was working from home. I had transitioned to working in an office 5 days a week to working from home. And our company was scrambling to figure out how to support their employees and they gave corporate access to Headspace. And so Headspace is a wellness meditation app. And I was on a streak. Like, I had been doing a really good job. I was on like at least a 20-day streak, which if anyone does it, that's a big deal. And so then George Floyd was murdered. And I remember our company was scrambling already because of the pandemic to figure out how to support employees, putting wellness practices in place. And then all of a sudden now they were scrambling from a racial equity and justice perspective of how do we support those that are impacted the most? So the pandemic we saw was impacting all of us in society as a whole, but it also was disproportionately affecting our Black and BIPOC communities, as well as after the murder of George Floyd, our company was really seeking to find ways to center our Black employees and create healing outlet spaces. And so what they did is they put together an all-call and all-hands meeting for them to listen. They implemented a listening session. And before that listening session, I was met with so much anxiety. I didn't think I could show up. I was having a hard time getting vertical. Being horizontal was really easy, but getting off the floor was really hard during that time. And I decided that I was gonna try and meditate. I really didn't want to, but I just laid horizontally in my backyard and I put that meditation on in the background. And I tried to ground myself before entering that listening session space. And I just let the sun hit me. It was probably the worst meditating session I've ever had, but I still did it. And just in time, my little 10-minute buzzer went up. It was time for me to join that meeting. And so I was in that space feeling a little bit more grounded, but not much, listening to my colleagues across the globe. So my company was a global company. So folks from the UK, Atlanta, and our home office in San Jose, mostly Black employees talking about their experience in corporate and just deep grief and pain of not feeling seen, heard, and validated during that time. And I remember I was just distraught listening to my peers and elders just expressing such discomfort and dis-ease in how the systems were treating them in such a pivotal moment. And so I remember I went off mute, and this is my first time really speaking up in a corporate meeting. And I just shared how uninterested I was in learning how to navigate another system differently as a Black woman, as a mixed race woman, and that it was up to the company, the institution, to do a better job. And I quickly started receiving a ton of private messages, not public because it's kind of taboo to express these things to corporate, of just thank you so much for speaking up. Thank you so much for honoring this. Like, you're right. We shouldn't have to learn how to navigate yet another institution. The institution should be catering to us more. And so that was my first time really speaking up and showcasing my voice in a meeting. And so from there, within a couple of days was when I got the call and internal pull to organize a protest. So I had really a lot of energy in my body and was figuring out what to best do with it. And I again got horizontal and meditated and was just quickly met with a voice of, you need to do something in a way that honors Black and BIPOC voices. We need more spaces where we can speak up and where people can just listen. And so that brings me to the concept of the ripple effect. So to me, the ripple effect is how individual systemic change starts from within. And the actual definition of the ripple effect is a spreading, pervasive, and usually unintentional effect or influence, or a situation in which one event produces effects that spread and produce further effects. So there's a lot of ways that you could see the ripple effect play out within our society. It's actually a term that comes from economics, which in true Bella fashion, I'm not going to be talking about that lane today. We're going to be talking about personal transformation and the ways it ripples out to influence social, environmental, cultural, institutional, and communal change. And so really the message that I hope for all of you to leave and take away today is just how that inner transformation really fuels outer change and can fuel your outer world and community as well. Here's a little graphic I created that got a little smushed, but really just trying to visually showcase that individual level rippling out in the ways that I have witnessed it. So starting on an individual level, which often can start to influence our interpersonal lives, so our community, whether that be friends, family, or actually like physically Santa Cruz, Cabrillo as an institution, and then moving out to cultural. So community influences culture and culture influences community, all the way up to systemic, structural, and institutional level. And what I like about the ripple effect for me is that I imagine that reverberation outward, but also the same ways that these systems influence our culture, which influence our community, which influence us. It's a effect that goes outward, but also reverberates back internally. So yeah, really hoping to explain just how pouring into yourself can help create those ripples and waves. And we're going to do so through photos about my personal experience. So as I mentioned, 2020 was the pandemic. I was working in tech. There was a lot of transition, a lot of discomfort. And so on June 5th, 2020, I organized my first protest ever in honor of the life of George Floyd and the murder of George Floyd. And this series of photos on this screen is set to just really showcase how one moment in my life organizing that protest that I didn't think anyone would go to, and over 5,000 people ended up attending. And that ripple really reverberated externally and has changed the entire course of my life. From that protest, you can see the picture behind with the paddle out. That was my first time in a wetsuit ever. So on June 7th, 2 days after the protest, I took that energy and braved the ocean in community with others. Because of that first event with so many people attending, all of a sudden I had this influence or power and people turning to me like, what are we gonna do? I don't know. What are we gonna do? And I saw a flyer for a paddle out. And in true honesty, it really bothered me because I was like, this paddle out is said to be for our community. It's said to be in honor of George Floyd, but how are organizers intentionally making sure that Black bodies are in the water, or BIPOC bodies, folks that were in the most mourning during this time? And so I reached out to the organizer and I said just that, like, hey, what's your plan to ensure access? Which is a word I didn't know is such a big deal, but access. What are you going to do to ensure that? And she was so sweet. She was like, I actually hadn't thought of that. Can we work together to make that happen? And so from a personal level, I posted on my social media and just did a call to action to the community of like, hey, are any allies or people willing to actually not paddle out, but leave their equipment for Black people to use, or offer their bodies as water safety, or reach out to surf schools and ask if we can get equipment rentals put on hold for the BIPOC community? And to my surprise, so many people were like, yeah, I never had considered that. I've seen culturally just the disconnect from Black and BIPOC peoples in the surf lineup, but a lot of people hadn't taken that intentional time to question why or how they can use their privilege or bodies to ensure that that access was available. And so my community ask was met with a resounding yes. And so many people reached out to local surf schools, asking them to be about that action, asking them to be in community. And a local surf shop, Cal Surf Shop, reached out to me and was like, if you can get a list of people that want to go out to this event, we will put all of our rentals on hold for the day. So I used Instagram and text, and a group of us that ended up totaling about 15 to 20 people all met in the Cal Surf Shop parking lot, suited up for the first time, and braved the ocean towards that paddle out that you can see hundreds of bodies. It was the most inclusive experience I've ever had in Santa Cruz. It was a picture and a seed for what's possible within our community. It was intergenerational, interracial. It just felt like there was such an effort for everyone to be there. And that's when the seed for Black surf was planted in my head, of just, as we were paddling in, someone was like, we need to do this again. Let's start a Black surf club. And I was like, you know what? Like, why would we not try and go surf now? I've never done that. I've lived within 6 miles of the beach for 15 years at this point, and this is my first time putting on a wetsuit. Like, it really rippled outward in a way that was incredible. And this third picture, me with a surfboard, because now the kid can surf. In September 2020, Black Surf Santa Cruz hosted our first ever pop-up surf lesson, and I caught my first wave for the first time. And it really gave me, as a person who had never surfed, who had not had that access just months before, enough courage and enough inspiration to start a surf organization before I had ever surfed, or I guess in the moment I had just surfed. And that to me speaks to the power of the ocean, and it speaks to the power of following your gut and your inner why. And so this is just also to kind of showcase how the individual level can start to ripple out to community. So that picture on the left is me when I first got to the protest, not knowing if anyone was gonna come, but just really excited to be there and excited to have an opportunity to channel some of that rage and energy that I had had in 2020. And the right side is the communal level. And so how one person can bring so many people together to have major impact. And so communal level continued. Over 5,000 people ended up attending that protest, and it has had mass ripples, probably waves at this point, since its starting. That protest really did change the course of my life and moved me closer to the ocean and my own purpose. And that was made possible because of so many individuals meeting that call to action, meeting that moment, and being willing to be transformed themselves. So here's some more pictures. Here's that paddle out that you can feel the energy, it's palpable. In Santa Cruz, to have hundreds of people screaming Black Lives Matter, to have people really willing to put their bodies on the line, people were towing us in and out. It was a true community effort that visibly shifted culture, because a lot of people don't consider why there aren't Black or BIPOC people in the lineup, but it takes that moment of visibility to put that on their radar within their consciousness to actually influence their individual lives, which ripples out and can make magic happen like this. So next I want to talk about the cultural level. So Black Surf Santa Cruz really serves as such a lens into the ways this personal transformation ripples outward. And so a lot of people may not know that surfing actually has native roots to West Africa. So before the transatlantic slave trade, before segregation, before America, Black people in African bodies had deep relationships with water in West Africa. And it's been very intentional and systemic in the ways that that disconnect has happened. And so the cultural level, what happened to me when I was in the ocean for the first time, really, it connected me. It reconnected me to my ancestors. It reconnected me to my roots and my stories, and the opportunity to learn that my people were wave riders. They were surfers alongside Native Hawaiians. And it's not like they were like picking up the phone and calling each other back then. It's an indigenous rooted practice. And so being able to create an opportunity to reconnect individually with my roots, but also to be able to do it on a communal and cultural level has been extremely powerful. This is why Black Surf Santa Cruz really is rooted in the beginner experience. Like, my hope is to get people into the ocean for the first time, people onto a surfboard, and give people the power to decide for themselves. Is this for me? Is this not for me? That's up to you. That's not up to society to tell us. That's not up to access to bar us from. It's up to us to create intentional spaces for people to be able to live within their own integrity and within their own autonomy to make decisions for themselves. And so this is one of the ways that Black Surf Santa Cruz really has made ripples from a cultural perspective. We, at the paddle out, you'll see everyone has flowers, and that's because historically and traditionally, paddle outs are a Hawaiian practice to honor someone who has passed away. It's a ritual to honor ancestors. And for me personally, since all of this started after the murder of George Floyd, and how can I honor the people who came before me? How can I honor the stories that really rippled and created this program? And so we provide all of our participants with flowers, and we circle up, and we have an opportunity to throw those flowers into the middle and call out to whatever people feel called, whether it's their ancestors, a loved one that's passed, the ocean itself. George Floyd, like, it's just an opportunity for everyone to come together in community and honor their why. Why are you there today? And so this is a picture from our very first pop-up surf lesson. It was in September 2020, and really it took our entire community to build the program. So as someone who had never surfed, how am I gonna create a surf program? That's when a bunch of individuals stepped in and stepped up to help us develop this. And so I view Black Surf Santa Cruz as a community love story because it creates an opportunity for people to come together and honor their individual. So we often have people joining us entering the water for the first time, which can bring up feelings of fear, discomfort. You can start to question, why have I never done this before? Some people feel angry. And by the time people enter the water and they're facing those fears, and the time that they're exiting the water and have transformed those fears into something more powerful or a new goal for themselves, our goal at Black Surf really is to honor people where they are at. So if someone has never been to the beach before and they get there and they're like, so maybe I want to surf, but then they're just like, actually, my goal today was just to get here, was just to be at the beach. It's really important for us as an organization to honor that and to cheer for that and to celebrate that, because that's moving someone closer to them making the decision for themselves. If someone just wants to put a wetsuit on, we've had people put wetsuits on and bail. And we're just like, hell yeah, like you did something so new and brave today. It's not easy to put a wetsuit on. It's very vulnerable. And so especially with how surf culture in Santa Cruz is so normalized, like I'm really comfy just changing on the side of the road. There's all these barriers and layers that people are working through on an individual level. Then they meet in community and you have these debriefs. And when people share their fears and they share their goals for the day, and all of a sudden you realize that you're not alone in that fear, you're not alone in that just having to meet the moment with courage, and we all celebrate and support one another. And by the time people come out, just the new goals they have for themselves of like, oh, I only rode on my belly today. Next time I want to make it to my knees, or maybe I want to stand, maybe I don't. We have people who just go out and just float and they just let their bodies surrender to the ocean. And historically and systemically, Black and BIPOC folks aren't offered the luxury of leisure, the luxury of rest. And it's very, very powerful to create spaces where we can do that individually, but are supported by community. And we've watched that shift culture and we've watched that shift systems as well. This is me on my first wave, which is wild that it's captured, but September 2020, that was my first pop-up, and it really has changed everything for me. And now talking about how all of those things and all of those opportunities for me to show up individually in my authenticity or in my own values have actually influenced and shifted systems. So Black Surf Santa Cruz existing in the first place in Santa Cruz is a very big deal. Our Black population here in Santa Cruz is less than 2%. And so we often get siloed and hidden behind the curtains. And considering that Santa Cruz is such a surf town, it's a tourist destination, when you think about feelings of belonging, it's really hard to feel like you belong in a community when you don't go in the ocean and it makes up so much of the culture here, or you don't feel safe to hike in the redwoods. Where are you going? And so Santa Cruz is also a tourist destination. And so to me, it's really important that it's viewed as a place that we want to have Black and BIPOC people here. And so, yeah, it's really important in that way. So our existence is a huge deal, being able to be incorporated as a nonprofit, and also really are showing up at the beaches. I did not know this, but there's a bunch of surf ordinances and there's a lot of permitting restrictions that are the reason the reason we don't see Black and BIPOC surf instructors often. A lot of times it's policy or it's housing. And so Black Surf Santa Cruz really aims to use all of these levels to shift systems. And one of our biggest, most notable and recent wins is winning access to be able to surf and do our programming at the county level we're the first ever nonprofit surf school. So our advocacy has really resulted in some systemic changes. We worked alongside county officials, county parks and recs, to advocate for them to create a nonprofit surf school process and application, just because the way the park system was working was the county only issues a few surf school permits every year. And so what it does is it creates a monopoly on who's able to teach lessons, and it makes the surfers in the surf schools become very territorial. So when we first started, there were so many times we were told we didn't belong. You can't be here. You're not allowed to teach surf lessons. You can roll under this surf school's permit. Like, it was very territorial, and they kept trying to push us further and further south, which I don't know if y'all know Shark Park, but like, I was very against afterwards just because I'm scared of sharks. And I think there's a really visible aspect of our work in that we do need to be integrated in Opal Cliffs. We do need to be integrated at CALS, because that's how we build community and let our message ripple out. And so I worked alongside county officials and the Coastal Commission to just kind of remind them of the Coastal Act and that it's really important that we're not barring access to people inadvertently. And so the county swiftly created that pilot process. And then the city of Santa Cruz recently, actually in March, alongside the Coastal Commission, implemented that no nonprofits or any tribes need permits to teach surf lessons at Cowles Beach, which is a huge win that ripples beyond just it's a huge win that ripples beyond just our program, which really starts to showcase how on an individual level, these rings can flow outward. And so not just Black Surf having access, that's not the goal. It's how do we get other nonprofits and NGOs and tribes, like to people who stewarded our land, how do we give access to them in a way that the city doesn't get 10% of? And so that was a very huge win. And just a lane I never would have dreamed for myself. Like, being in the advocacy world is very new for me. And it looks different on a systems level than it does being a grassroots activist, like boots on the ground. And so being able to also move through those different levels myself has been very powerful, and just getting to know where I want to be as a leader as well. Let's see. Oh, and then also with that surf school permitting updates, all of the surf schools now have to go through equity training, which I personally love. And so our advocacy has benefited the entire Santa Cruz community and beyond. And that beach management plan access update at the city of Santa Cruz level is something that the Coastal Commission and ourselves, Black Surf, are talking about. How could we use that to set state precedent and to tell like counties of San Diego that they need to do better? And so this is just kind of visually the ways you can see my own personal evolution of on a systemic level. So yeah, yesterday we're at the state capitol advocating for ocean access as an organization, and that photo is a surf justice collective. So it's another way that individuals come together to make up organizations, which come together to make up collectives and community, and that's where our voice is just that much more powerful. And so again, this is just to kind of reground us in the ways that we moved outward. And then also wanting to kind of touch on the ways these systems, of course, impact us. And so one of the things that I really appreciated about my old organization is the ways that they really invested into their employees on an individual level. And so healthy systems are built by healthy people. And so oftentimes when we have a human effect, like that access to Headspace changed my life, that access to a thriving wage changed my life. And it's not fair to just say that you as an individual need to make all these changes, but it is an opportunity to put the onus back on us and to take our power back and to start from within and then let these things flow outwards, and we can start to become aware of the ways that they're influencing us as well. And here are some more photos. This is us at the state capitol yesterday as a collective. And yeah, it's just been very joyous. And so in closing, really just wanting to close with this quote of caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare from Audre Lorde. So just a reminder that taking that time for yourself is how we influence systems, it's how we impact each other, and it's very important to start from within. And that's all. And we do have a moment and opportunity for Q&A, if anyone has any questions.
I have a question. Organizing this nonprofit and navigating this was so new for you. How do you feel is like when you have like questions or you don't know how to go about things, how do you feel is like the best way to like interact with those around your interact with the community to like and collaborate with the community to work towards something or to like get those like and questions answered? What do you think is like the best way to like collaborate with others to accomplish that?
To do that, yeah. I'm very fortunate to have like a very strong support system and community around me. And through Black Surf Santa Cruz as well, we have a board of directors. So I have a ton of mentors. I have my mom over there. I have a lot of sounding boards. I'm a big out loud venter. It's really important, or like journal processor. And so just having people that also trusted containers where you can kind of get there yourself is really important too. Where you're able to like seek advice, but also have people who challenge your own thinking and like really push you to move towards liberation and towards like some of these things that we can't get to on our own. And so I just really surround myself with people that I want to be like, people that challenge me, people that support me. I love like friends that send you book recs, like kind of subtly, just having a so strong support system of people. Yeah, and then being willing to learn and change and accept when you have made a mistake, accept where you have room for growth, and just where you can do better as well.
Like, especially like starting like incorporating like, the personal things, like your friend that takes you the book back or like your journal, like all of that like really does contribute to like bigger things. It's nice to like keep that in mind too, that they're so important, even if it's just the text or the journal.
Yeah, and then actually reading them and sharing with someone else. Yeah. Hi.
And also, I would think that some people gave they got way back.
Yes, he did.
That's just sort of. I had to write something on the services one. It was easy to have everybody.
Thank you. Have a good class. Thank you.
Well, communication, not that you want, I understand that.
That's awesome. Question. I don't think the ripple effect only happens for traumatic events. I think it happens in like daily interactions, even moments like this. So I hope I'm not traumatizing y'all right now. But I hope that you can also take this and infuse it into your life in the ways that mean something to you. I do think, like when I consider the ripple effects roots in economics, where it comes from, a lot of times it's like the ways an earthquake will affect the supply chain, which will affect this economy. And so it is kind of rooted in like something big or major shifting and happening, but I don't think that it has to. And I think that the smaller ripples are actually kind of like the bigger, better ones. But yeah, no, kind of both and.
so much for sharing that story. How can I, tell students about your organization? Is there a website?
Yeah, we're on, our website is blacksurfsantacruz.org, or our Instagram is blacksurfsantacruz. And so you can just direct them to our page and they can kind of figure out if they want to join as a member, a volunteer, or just a supporter as well. Yeah, of course. Great question.
Hi, I heard earlier in your presentation when you were talking about, getting access for local indigenous people, and I think it was like approving the surf school that you had to work with like local governing regulatory bodies. And you kind of just like breezed by that, like as if it wasn't very difficult to do, and those are typically like very slow to change groups and very difficult to get any progress. So
Yeah.
was that relatively easy? Was it incredibly difficult? Were they really trying their best to help, but like the system was just a slow moving system? I was just curious about all that.
Yeah, I appreciate that question because it was a very traumatic process for me. It was a lot of work and a lot of emotional labor, especially because a lot of these systems, they're quite literally built to keep Black and BIPOC bodies out, and to make it very difficult for us to prove our capability and our capacity. And so it was one of those moments where like the thing is the thing, where this is why Black surf exists and this is what we're being met up against. And a lot of them were really resistant in the beginning, or that hot potato game of like, this is city, this is county, this is this jurisdiction, talk to this person. And so what really helped me was linking up with people who in Pacifica, because a lot of this access publicly permitting conversations started in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd in Pacifica. With a lot of tension between surf schools and nonprofits on Lindamar Beach, I believe. And so I ended up just very naturally getting placed with the right people, like the people who were having the right conversations, the people who could point me to who to talk to, the people who infused me with the language of how to talk to these people, like speak their language. We don't necessarily speak the same language. And so yeah, it took a lot, and it was a lot of energy, and it was a very slow move. Like there's one video on my Instagram of me cussing the city out, and that was like what moved it the most. And so it's like you never know what is gonna be the thing that shifts. A lot of times the institutions, the way they're set up, are to kind of shrink you and make you play small and just like quietly be quiet. And it was actually, I'll go back, because it was this picture, and this is one of those things where it's like you can't even make it up. So this picture was from when we took the Santa Cruz Warriors operations team surfing for the first time. And I at this point had permits just to do our programs at Private's Beach in Opal Cliffs, which now is a county park, but wasn't then. And there's just all these dances they do. And so I pivoted. That was right after one of the storms. The staircase was gone. It's a bunch of basketball coaches that don't know how to surf. This is their first experience. You could see it was a stormy day. And I pivoted to Cal's Beach. Like, I was just like, I'm not taking them somewhere with no bathrooms, no stairs. Like, this is nuts. And I knew we weren't supposed to be there. But at the same time, I was like, who's gonna say something? Well, this picture ended up going front page of the Sentinel, and the city of Santa Cruz called me and was like, did you have permits for this event? And I was like, well, you know, I didn't, because I would have to get permits for you. So like, what do we do from here? And that's when that video on my social media happened, of just the burst of like, y'all are trying to corral us. You're monitoring our social media. It really created like the tension that was needed for it to burst. And so when you ask if it always has to be traumatic, sometimes I'm like, we should just all stop not only moving when things are traumatic and listen when things are smaller, because that helps. But it does sometimes feel like it's these big tension bursting points where it leaves the most room for things to emerge. So yeah, it was this photo that actually like propelled us into a new stage of the conversation. And the county saw that video and was like, we don't want that to be us. So they did their nonprofit piloting thing, and then the city followed. And then now the Coastal Commission is like, Santa Cruz is great. Let's use Santa Cruz as a model. I'm like, sure. Go for it.
Was an
ally, so I know they have gotten into it with search schools in the past.
Mhm.
Permission like that, do you feel like that was an easy relationship with them, and were they eager to help support Black Surf Santa Cruz?
The Coastal Commission is the best government agency that I know of personally. I love the way they make cities and counties like sweat a little bit. They were very supportive. They were very eager to also teach the language, to like talk to these policymakers. And then they also started to kind of be like, well, we're not going to approve your coastal development plan if you don't do this. So they definitely like moved them along. Yeah, I love the Coastal Commission for that. Any other questions? It looks like we have a couple more minutes. Go for it.
So as you're moving through this emotional journey, right, and healing, I imagine at the same time, I know you mentioned the support systems around you being important to move through it. How else did you gather inner strength to push through when it was their hardest moment?
Oh, I feel like sometimes those moments just present themselves to me and I'm like, oh, I didn't know I needed someone to say that one thing. Or I think it's moments when we got this win and when all of our ally organizations were just so excited and turning to us as like leaders, just starting to see myself as that has been really helpful. Journaling, documenting the process. It's really easy to like let a bad day run over all of the good ones. And so I have this little mason jar where I write good things in, and I just fold them in there. And then when I'm like sad, I'll just dump it out on the floor and be like, look at all the cool stuff you've done. So definitely like very intentional strategies to not lose my mind a little bit, because systemic racism is set to like be in your body. And so like having those people that you can talk to about it with, and they're just like, oh, that's the thing. And you're like, oh, that's why it like feels like that. Education is a really big one. So when I went to Cabrillo, I was able to get the tools and the words to the experiences that I was having. And that really empowered me to just be like, this isn't okay. This is the thing y'all have all these equity statements and visions about. And so, yeah, my support system has been huge. And then they encourage me to get broader support as well.
For education and work experience, so I was intrigued that you were a recruiter before. How do you think that will brought you to that career, like form the willingness or ability to take on?
Yeah. I worked for a really good company. And so I worked for a very values-driven, values-based organization that made it really easy to recruit for, because I was happy, I was embodying the values that they were about. And so it helped like attract the right candidates. It made it easier to actually talk about it. And so there was that synergy and alignment there. And it also really taught me that like, no one has a problem with a values-based organization when it's tech. But all of a sudden, when you start to say like Black Surf Santa Cruz, then there's like all these qualms and disqualifiers. And so that organization really gave me the tools to like advocate for our values, because they were always just, oh, it's not a value fit. Like there's not alignment there. And in the same breath, the name of Black Surf Santa Cruz kind of serves as that temp check sometimes too, of like, are you for Black like liberation? If not, this might not be the space for you, lovingly. But I think it really empowered me and like gave me a lot of the technical skills and confidence. Like I was fresh out of college, having to go knock on the VP's glass window of like, you're 30 minutes late for your interview. Like I had to be kind of gutsy in that way. And it kind of helped me get some of those corporate savviness a little bit.
Thank you for sharing your story. I just wanted to share the impact of that photo of you standing alone. After all the people that showed up in your vision. Just sometimes we think that one voice can't do anything, just, you know, and just to show what one person can start when you form community and you build off of each other. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That feels like a good closing comment, unless anyone has final thoughts. And thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
All right, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Imposter Syndrome Workshop. Here I have Adam Mathews, who is a Government Relation Director of the Faculty Association of the California Community Colleges. She is a proud California Community College graduate and received her BA in Politics from the University of San Francisco. Her identity as a young woman of color and in working in the advocacy sector has both subjected her to imposter syndrome and empowered her to be a better advocate and leader. So please, everyone, undivided attention.
Hi everyone, I'm Hannah. It's really nice to be here at Cabrillo. It's my first time. Such a beautiful campus. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here. So Arturo and I were talking a little bit earlier and I was just curious if I could get a show of hands who here is a student. Awesome. We have some staff in the room as well. Cool. Well, I'm excited to meet you and excited to have you here. So today we are going to be chatting about navigating imposter syndrome in professional spaces. Arturo shared a little bit about my personal journey, but I'm a couple years into my career now, and I've dealt with my fair share of imposter syndrome. And this is a workshop that I've given at a couple of Student Senate conferences, and I'm really excited to share this with you. It's going to be a very engaging session, and so I know that we're all scattered throughout the room. We're probably going to need to move around a little bit. We do have some group work and exercises, so get ready to get moving, and it's going to be a very active session. So I'm really excited. Let's hop into it. So imposter syndrome is a battle that I think we have to fight for lots of our lives. It's an ongoing thing that, as we'll talk about, kind of evolves with us as we learn and as we grow. So I wanted to take some advice from Sun Tzu, who wrote a war treatise on how do we fight imposter syndrome. So what he says is, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. You know yourself, but not the enemy. For every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. So what does this mean for us? In order for us to beat imposter syndrome, there are a couple things we need to do. First, we need to know imposter syndrome. If we don't know what we're up against, we won't be able to combat it. Next, we need to be able to know ourselves, know our identities, and be able to understand the ways in which imposter syndrome impacts us in our everyday lives. Then we can learn to reframe the narrative about what the false narratives that imposter syndrome is telling us about ourselves and rewrite our story in a way that is empowering to us. And we can take that into our advocacy journeys. And advocacy is a really difficult thing to do, I think, whether it's for yourself or for your community, and we need to learn how to make advocacy sustainable. And we're going to talk about how community is the antidote to burnout and trying to build some community in this room. So let's get started. Knowing imposter syndrome. So what is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is a psychological occurrence in which a person doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments and have an internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. Who here has experienced imposter syndrome before? Yeah, a decent amount of folks in the room. So lots of people, as you can imagine, are impacted by imposter syndrome in many different ways. I think sometimes we have a very two-dimensional view of imposter syndrome, maybe that only if you look a certain way or from a certain background or lived experience that you can experience imposter syndrome. But if there are many different ways that, as we will dive into in a second, that imposter syndrome manifests in and different facets of our identity that it can target. So let's learn a little bit about the different. I can get my slide to move. So in order to figure out kind of how imposter syndrome manifests in our lives, there are many different ways. So intersectionality is a useful framework that I think we can use to understand how imposter syndrome can impact us. So intersectionality is an analytical framework created by Kimberly Crenshaw, who was a sociologist in 1989. And intersectionality basically describes how our different social and political identities can result in unique combinations of privilege and discrimination. So for every type of identity that we can have a subordinate or a dominant identity, one that either privileges us or constitutes some sort of marginalization. So Kimberly Crenshaw created this because as a Black woman, she realized that she was not only marginalized by the fact that she was Black, but also the fact that she was a woman. And it was sort of this double whammy, if you will. And it's not just about race or about gender, but there are so many different aspects of our identities that we can have that can create imposter syndrome for us. For example, for me, my age is something that sometimes I get imposter syndrome about. I'm a visibly pretty young person and I'm not a student. I've been working for a few years now, but that is the assumption that everybody jumps into, right? So that is something that has been a source of imposter syndrome for me, feeling like maybe I don't belong because of the way that I look, right? Or if you are an older or returning student, you know, maybe somebody thinks that you're the professor and you're like, no, I'm a student, right? And it can also be a daunting thing to be the oldest person, right? So there are so many different aspects of our identity, whether it's our mental health, which we're at a mental health conference, so our physical ability, our religion, our socioeconomic class, our age, like I mentioned, the level of education that we have, our housing status, our ability to be food secure, our access to transportation, our marital status, our citizenship, especially nowadays as tensions are on the rise. Our whether or not English is our first language in a country that predominantly speaks English, our gender, our sexuality, the size of our bodies, our skin color. There's so many different aspects of our lives that we can have dominant or subordinate identities in. Those are all sorts of different ways in which our imposter syndrome can impact us. So I know that this wheel is a little bit far away and it's not a perfect wheel, but I think I discussed a lot of different types of identities that we can have. So for our first activity, this is a more personal one. If you have a piece of paper or your phone notes app works just fine as well. I want you to write down 5 aspects of your identity that are important to you. We have our 5 aspects of our identity written down. Yeah. Okay, so now I want you to turn to a neighbor, preferably someone who you don't already know. I know it's really easy for us to sit next to people we know. But I want you to chat with someone who you haven't talked to before. If you need to move, that's okay. And I want you to share 1 or 2 aspects of your identity with that person. And introduce yourself.
Yeah. Let's call this room back to order.
There we go.
Hi.
All right, so I'm really glad to hear that we are having some robust conversations over here. So would anybody like to share any of their identities with the group? This is supposed to be engaging, and if I'm the only one who's engaging, it's not gonna be as fun for all of us. So Arturo, kick us off.
Yeah, in the conversation that I was having, I didn't even consider this as an identity, but English is my second language. Right, so that was one that I thought was a new way to look at it.
Yeah, that is definitely, and on this wheel, language and communication, right? If you're a native English speaker, that gives you a level of privilege over someone who, English is not their first language. But we'll talk about flipping those identities, and we'll talk about the superpowers that also gives you. Right, go ahead over here.
To that, seems like, the most important identity to the Spanish speaker,
Mhm.
and like, use accent, but in like, the community,
Mhm.
but also to connect with them.
Yeah. Mhm. Anyone else? Go ahead.
There's really kind of a lot, we do a lot of math and
Math student.
Cool. Okay, so we're going to use, and I'm hoping for more participation from the group in the next couple of exercises that we do, but next, let's see, what is this next slide? Cool. Okay, so knowing ourselves. So now we've talked about the different identities that we have. So imposter syndrome can target those specific identities and make us feel like we don't belong, or we're a fraud, or we're not capable, or we don't have what we need already within us to succeed. So think about, and I'd like you to use this sentence framework that I kind of have set up, which we'll talk through in a second. But take one or two of your identities and think about how imposter syndrome targets that facet of your identity. So for an example, I have this sentence structure where we can sort of flip our perceptions of those narratives, right? For an example, when I was doing an internship in Sacramento and I was learning about policy advocacy at the state level. I had come from I'm coming from Stockton, drove 3 hours to get here, very low income community and very diverse, but we didn't have access to things like the Capitol, and these spaces often felt kind of off limits to us, right? And when I was doing that internship and I'm working in the Capitol and we're doing all these cool things and I'm working with lawyers from Harvard and all this stuff, I just felt that imposter syndrome, that because I'm from Stockton and like this is, my background, my imposter syndrome is telling me that I don't belong in a space as fancy as the Capitol, right? That's not a space for me to be in. And I think that was something that I really had to grapple with, because I felt like I was holding myself back from reaching my full advocacy potential because I felt that I didn't belong, right? So I know that imposter syndrome targets some of our facets of our identities in different ways. Another example is, being a community college student. Sometimes there's a stigma around going to community college as opposed to going to a four-year university, or if you're a returning student. Our imposter syndrome can tell us all sorts of things, that we're not at such a prestigious institution or something, or that I'm on a non-traditional pathway, and there's so many different things that imposter syndrome can tell ourselves based on kind of our circumstances and where we're situated at. So I wanted you to do this writing exercise and take 2 of the five identities that you picked and use this sentence framework to sort of flip that narrative. So because I am blank, my imposter syndrome tells me blank. We'll start with that first piece and then we'll flip it in a second. So first on, we're gonna write two facets of our identities and the ways in which imposter syndrome has impacted it. Yes, we have a
So the
question.
second sentence, should it be the same word as the first?
Let's start with the first sentence and then we'll go back to the second sentence. First sentence done. Would anybody like to share? Because I am blank, my imposter syndrome tells me blank. Right over here in the front.
Because I am female, my imposter syndrome tells me I'm less than.
Because I am female, my imposter syndrome tells me I'm less than. Yeah, in a patriarchal society, it is very easy to feel like, that these spaces were not created for you or you don't belong in them. But we have to keep showing up. Anyone else? Go ahead. Because I experience anxiety, my imposter syndrome tells me I cannot do great things. I had a really great conversation with someone about what it's like being neurodivergent or experiencing things like anxiety that can make it hard to do things that other people feel are easy or regular to do. But that doesn't, and it can make us feel like we're not as capable, but we are. We just walk through the world a little bit differently, and that's okay, and it's important. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Because I'm a Latino woman, my imposter syndrome tells me that I won't succeed in STEM.
Yeah, because I'm a Latina woman, my imposter syndrome tells me I won't succeed in STEM. And that really connects to what you're talking about, right? STEM is a field that has historically not been that diverse, right? So when you're sitting in a classroom, you're like, "Ooh, I don't see anyone who looks like me over here." It's really easy to feel like you don't belong in those spaces. I've definitely experienced that working in the advocacy sector as a young woman of color when I'm working in a field that's predominantly older, white and male. Right, and feeling like, okay, maybe I don't belong here, or my perspective isn't valued, right? So we'll move to the second piece of the statement. Being blank enables me to blank. So we're gonna take those same identities that you talked about, and kind of flip our perception of that. So like I was saying, being a young woman of color, my imposter syndrome tells me that I don't belong in advocacy spaces because I don't often run across people who look like me or have similar experiences to me. But being a young woman of color is something that enables me to bring the perspectives of my communities into those spaces where our voices are not heard, and make sure when people are making policy that they're considering perspectives that may not be in the room. And I think that's something that's made me a stronger advocate, even though it's something I've had to experience imposter syndrome. I want to go back and write out that second sentence. Writing that out, I want you to go back to the person who you first shared your identities with and share your sentence framework. So because I am blank, my imposter syndrome tells me blank, but being blank enables me to blank. So how do we reframe things that we have perceived to be our own disadvantages and reframe those to see how they can actually be our superpowers sometimes? So go ahead and share with the person.
Being female enables me to be empowered.
Go back to groups for a second.
Oh.
Yes, sorry, that wasn't clear.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. So I see that we have a couple different groups that have formed, so I'm wondering if we can maybe have one person from each group share. So, can we start with this group right over here in the front?
My. Professional.
No excuses.
But it's. Well, when you get.
So it was the second, what was the second line?
Yeah.
So I said, being a male figure enables me to practice kindness.
Yes, 100%. I think that's another thing, right? There are dominant and subordinate identities that we have, and we need to be able to use the privilege that we have to make the world a better place for other people, right? So I think Arturo using the fact that he's a male to display kindness, right? And protection and different things, like that's a blessing that he has when he could use that to be hurtful, right? To make that choice. I think an example for me, one of my dominant traits is that I'm a Christian, and I think being in America, that is something that, especially these days, can make lots of people feel unsafe. At least that's what I've experienced in talking to different people, but if I can, show people that we can be compassionate and we can be kind and we can be respectful of other people's lived experiences and really love on people well, I think that is one way that I can use that privilege to make the world a better place. Okay, we had a group that was over here. We have someone share. Go ahead. Yeah. Being able to be a role model for other people who have a similar experience as you. That's something that's really important. What about over here? I know, she's like, why'd you come back to me?
Okay, I'll go ahead and do mine. Because of my mom, my imposter syndrome tells me I'm not a good enough mom. And then being a mom enables me to have inner strength. Find that source of power to push through the hard moment.
Yeah, and knowing that you're the best person for your child. Yeah. We had a group over here. We have anyone share?
Say this too, this is kind of a thing about coming back to school. So for myself, I came back to school for studio art, but my career wasn't in art. And so then I feel like I've been monster, that I'm not really an artist, that I would say. I don't have anything original because I've seen pretty much throughout my life. And then I'm not being productive. And I'm not creating anything meaningful in society, which is another thing to unpack. But then I decided that being a retired returning student in studio art and not having been an artist in my career enables me to create art that reflects my life and even though it's not important that it reaches other people, that reach people like myself who had different careers than artists. Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. Art and creativity is an expression of our lived experience, right? And we need people with so many different types of lived experiences to share those creations, right? And I think that also says a lot about the role in the community college, right? As being a hub for lifelong learning, that it's not just for somebody who's like straight out of high school, right? Who's gonna do 2 years and then transfer, that no matter what walk of life you're from, that we have a place for you here at Cabrillo, and we have classes, and that the goal is for you to better yourself as a human being. Education is a public good. Yeah, we had a group over here.
Thirdly, I'm a perfectionist. My imposter syndrome told me I am capable of failure. Being a perfectionist enables me to put 100% passion into
100%. And, I had popped in to hang out with that group and we were talking about how lots of these traits, they have pluses and minuses, right? And if we can figure out how to harness those pluses and then drop the imposter syndrome, right? We can use that to really reach new heights, right? So being able to not let your perfectionism hold you back or stop you from trying new things because you're afraid of failure, but using that perfectionism to give your 100% in everything you do, right? As long as it's not preventing you from moving forward and doing things, like, that's a blessing. Need a group in the back corner over there.
I was saying, because I am a mental labor and my imposter syndrome tells me that I'm worthy of
What does being a manual laborer enable you to do?
It enables me to show a lot of fortitude, especially when it's very uncomfortable, and especially when it's very physically hard and physically demanding.
Yeah, that's really great, right? And we need people of so many different types of backgrounds to enter those types of spaces, right? And you can be that representation for other manual laborers at UC Berkeley. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we've talked about imposter syndrome, what it is, how it impacts us, right? And we've kind of been able to flip that narrative for things that we are experiencing at this stage in our lives, right? Think it was imposter syndrome. But as we grow and as we go through different eras and stages of our lives, we'll cycle through different identities and different levels of powers and privilege. And as our identities evolve, so will our relationship with imposter syndrome, right? So, I guess an example, like for me, I did the broke college student thing, working multiple jobs, the whole 9 yards. And I have kind of leveled up, right? And now I get to work one job, which is really nice. But I have different types of imposter syndrome now than I did when I was in school, right? So even if we overcome one type of imposter syndrome, it's not a one and done. I wish my thing on beating imposter syndrome is like, yeah, here's the cheat code and you're done for the rest of your life. You're never gonna have to deal with it again. But unfortunately, it does like to creep up in different types of ways over the courses of our lives. So beating imposter syndrome is not a one-time thing, it's a lifelong process, right? And our relationship with it will evolve. So these exercises that we did, right, about knowing ourselves and our identities, which will change over time, right? And understanding how our imposter syndrome impacts those different types of identities that we have to make it a practice to keep on doing that introspection, right? And to keep on seeing, okay, how is imposter syndrome impacting me in these areas, right? In this current stage of my life. Being able to continually flip those false narratives, right? Because like I said, it's not a one and done. And to be able to really maintain a healthy perception of ourselves and the world around us. How are things from my past impacting me? How are things that I'm doing in my present going to impact my future? Fire drill. And how do we really make sure that we're not letting our imposter syndrome cripple us or prevent us from reaching our full potential? So I think this is advocacy I do it in a state level sense, but it doesn't have to be that, right? It can be advocating for yourself, for your community, right? And I think all of us need to do some level of that. And it requires us to make ourselves vulnerable in order to protect ourselves and others, to have representation, to make it so Latino women feel like STEM is a place where they can be, right? So we get to a place where people who English is not their first language feel seen and heard, and we have ways that they feel understood, and we make things as accessible and inclusive as possible. All of those different things take advocacy, right? Making community college as accessible as possible for returning students, regardless of their age, for our student parents, right? all of those things, I think, require us to sort of share our stories and be vulnerable about our lived experiences. So it's really hard, but in order to make positive changes in the world and make it so imposter syndrome has less of an impact and we have less of these external factors telling us these negative things about ourselves, we have to go out and change the world, but that's a really hard thing to do. And it's really difficult for us to be able to go out and do that if we don't have a strong community, right, to back us up, to make us feel safe, to make us feel loved, people who know us, people who believe in us. It can be really easy to burn out in your efforts to make your college a better place, to make your department a better place, to make Santa Cruz a better place, right? So one of the things that I wanted to do today, I know we don't have a ton of time left, but to build some community in this group. I know that not everybody here knows each other, so I wanted to do a quick community building exercise, and I hope that you will leave today knowing someone who you didn't know before. So we're gonna do this exercise, and I'm going to list out some different traits or characteristics. And if this is something that resonates with you or something that you've experienced, I'd like you to stand up. So we'll start with some fun ones first. If you play an instrument, stand up. Would anyone like to share what instruments they play? Anything fun?
Yeah.
Piano, cool. What do you play, Flor?
I haven't played in a while, but the flute.
The flute, very cool.
The violin.
Violin, wow, very cool.
Yeah, I played piano.
Mm-hmm. Anyone in the back?
I think it's you.
The kazoo.
I mean, hey, you laugh, I got 20,000 views on YouTube.
Hey, it's an instrument. No judgment zone. Very cool. Yeah. I also play a couple of instruments, but guitar is my favorite. All right. Stand up. This is controversial. If you like pineapple on pizza.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no. I'm a little bit horrified that like 3/4 of the room is standing up right now. Okay, all you degenerates can sit down. Stand up if you have a tattoo. Does anyone have a cool tattoo they'd like to share with the class? They're all cool, Claudia? I also people.
I have one of my dog that passed away. It got in
Oh, that's really sweet.
yeah, a year ago, so I got him tattooed on my arm.
I'm sorry for your loss.
So it's thank
Yeah, cool. It's a classic community college student experience. Stand up if you've changed your major. All right, sit back down. Stand up if you have a pet. Does anyone have a cool pet, like an interesting pet, like not a cat or a dog pet? What do you have in the back?
I used to have a tarantula. My cat.
Anyone else? Okay,
Hummingbird,
hummingbird, that is a very cool pet, I've never heard of that before.
not captured, but actually ours in our backyard, we support. Yeah.
You support the hummingbird, very cool. Anyone else?
Have a turtle, two bunnies,
Whoa.
a dog, two cats, 3 kids.
That's a zoo. Okay, let's sit back down. Does anyone collect anything? Yeah. What do you collect?
I have a dice collection, but there's only like 6 dice in the collection because I'm really particular about it. So at the 6 dice collection, buttons.
Cool. I collect keychains. I have more keychains than I will ever have keys. Yeah, unfortunately. Anyone else have a cool collection?
Concert tickets, but
Awesome.
technology ruined that for me. They're all e-tickets now.
Okay. All right, so now we're going to move into some that are kind of more related to imposter syndrome. Stand up if you're a first generation college student. Can we just have a little round of applause for all these people? Awesome. Back down. Stand up if you're a student parent. Okay. I want you guys to look around and know that you have a community of people who have a similar lived experience.
It's hard out here, man.
Yes. Stand up if you're comfortable if you're part of the LGBTQ community. Yeah. Stand up if you are a returning or older student. Awesome. We will on.
What's older?
Right? Whatever that means to you, open to interpretation. Stand up if you've experienced food or housing insecurity. Yeah, you're here. You made it. Stand up if you've worked more than one job while you're in school. In the trenches, but we gotta do it. Stand up if English is your second language. Amazing. Lastly, stand up if you are a community college student or work for the community college and you are an incredible person with an invaluable amount of worth. Okay, so that's all I have for you today. I hope you met some new people and have learned some new ways to navigate your imposter syndrome. I have my email up on the screen. If you'd like to chat about all the things, and thank you for having me.
Hi, everybody. So first off, I just like to thank everybody for coming and being here. And I'd like to thank all of our wonderful peer wellness ambassadors for helping set this up. Bridget, Apollo, Daniela, Andrina, Mari, Arturo, myself, and everyone played a big part in this, and I really appreciate it. Thank you to all of our advisors that helped make it possible as well. So this next presentation is going to be from some of the Active Minds members, and for those of you that don't know, Active Minds was founded in 2003 by Allison Mallman. After, unfortunately, a couple years before her brother committed suicide. It inspired her to form this club, and when she was at the University of Pennsylvania, it really took off and spread out through a lot of college campuses across the nation. So Active Minds is a student-led organization that is in I think over 200 colleges across the nation, and it's dedicated to ending the stigma around mental health by sharing information, providing students with resources, and just getting together to practice healthy coping mechanisms. So statistics show that most young people turn to a friend when they're struggling with something, but 70% of them don't know how to go about that interaction. They don't know what to say to try to help their friend. So this presentation is about ask, which is acknowledge, support, and keep in touch. And I'd like to introduce Andrina, Daniela, and Apollo, and they'll be doing the presentation today.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, the acronym ASK, acknowledge, support, and keep in touch. We wanted to start off this conversation by having you guys reflect on how do you support your friends, or how do your friends make you feel supported? If you'd like to chat next to somebody that you chat with the person you're sitting next to, and just share really quick how you support your pals, or how do your pals make you feel supported? Yeah. What's your name? Yeah. I think that would be good. I have an example.
And so it's trying to reverse.
Especially with like small. Yeah, like that person we're seeing and noticing things like. All right, guys, if you could start wrapping up your one-on-one conversations, and we'll open it up to the group in just a moment. Yeah. Okie dokie, can we bring the attention back over here? Before we open it up to hear what you guys have to say, an example that comes to mind, when how do you support your friends, or how do your friends support you? Something that happened 20 minutes ago was my friend Tressa at work sent me a picture of like latte art that they made, and they said, a jellyfish for you, and it was just like this really sweet latte art that they did, and I haven't hung out with Tressa in like a few weeks, and it's really sweet that they thought of me and wanted to share this with me. So that made me feel supported, because even though we haven't hung out in a little bit, like, this is thinking of me, and that's cute. Did anybody want to share an example? What's that?
That was a beautiful thing, because we don't always get to see our friends in person. So with social media, even just if a post reminds you of them, send it to them. Oh my God, it's so beautiful.
Definitely.
That makes you feel special, and then that person kind of is thinking of you.
Totally, yeah, like one of my friends, who's like into photography will like send me, like every once in a while, like send me like an Instagram post, and it's like, look how cool this is, and it's just, yeah, it's little things like that.
They can still build connections, yeah.
Definitely.
And for me, what I like to do is, I like to invite people just to go for a walk somewhere. Just being outside and then I always say it's like walking therapy, cause we talk. And I'm getting some emotional stuff out and it feels good.
Yeah, no, it's so important, and even if it's not like a whole endeavor, like, let's go get dinner, it's just like, let's go do like this simple thing together and we connect for however long works for us. It's super important. What did your guys' group talk about?
Yeah, we talked about, being present and just listening, so we as well, had a really thoughtful, approach of like being compassionate, like helping lighten the load for other people and the acts of service, that was really thoughtful, because, being on the other end, maybe not the person necessarily doing it, but just when you're feeling really overwhelmed, or just things are really chaotic, and give a nice gesture, or somebody like, okay, don't worry about that, I'll help you with it, or just here's a little trinket to lift your mood, it really makes a difference.
Definitely, yeah, when people are like compassionate with like how they speak with you, and like you can tell like they're like slowing down to like acknowledge you a bit more. Super, it's really nice. Did you guys want to share an example?
For me, like some of you were saying, like it's hard to see your friends sometimes, especially if they live in another town. So like what I try to do with my friends is schedule a phone call where we're not going to be distracted by anything else, and we can really give each other like full attention as if we were hanging out in person. So trying to schedule that, how I support my friends.
Yeah. That being said, sometimes when we want to support those in our lives, we want to support our pals. Sometimes it's hard to know exactly what to do, and like what Andrew said, like 70% of young people report feeling unsure on how to support their pals, so even though we want to, it's like a little bit of a universal feeling to like not know how to from time to time. So this acronym A.S.K is super helpful. It's a really great framework on how to navigate those conversations. So ask, acknowledge, support, and keep in touch. I wanted to start off with acknowledge by something to try to not do when approaching a conversation. We want to go about it in a way that feels warm and welcoming. And sometimes when we say things like what's wrong, or opening up a conversation with that statement, it kind of can catch people off guard a bit. We want to give our friends space to talk if they would like to, and approaching them with what's wrong can be a little bit kind of catching people off guard, or if they're not in the space to like talk about it, it can kind of make them feel a little bit pressured to talk sometimes, even if they don't want to. So I put a few examples up here on like how to start the conversation with the people in our lives by stating like an observation, something along the lines of, I know it's a crazy time of the semester. I know X, Y, and things have been taking up a lot of your time, or we haven't chatted in a while. And lastly, I've noticed you've been more withdrawn lately. And then following up, concluding, like finishing the sentence with, how are you handling yada yada? I know X, Y, and things have been taking up a lot of your time. I'm here to listen if you want to chat, or I really like this next one. We haven't chatted in a while. If you're busy today, I'm free this weekend to catch up if you'd like. I like this one because it kind of offers like a framework of when the catch up can happen. So if you're busy today, like this designated time can be for you and for us to talk if you need to. And another one that is a little bit, when we approach our pals, we don't want to assume what they're feeling. We don't want to assume like you seem sad or you seem irritated. We want to not make assumptions, but make observations, so. The example of, I've noticed you've been more withdrawn lately, it's not like assuming how they're feeling, it's just kind of still observing like a behavior that they're displaying. And if, yeah, we want to try our best to avoid language that assumes how another person is feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, so another important step in acknowledging is acknowledging emotions. This can be a little bit hard sometimes because everyone experiences emotions differently, so they might not even know what they're feeling. So some people might feel the emotion in their body first and then name it later. Others might be able to name the emotion in their thoughts and then like think about how they were feeling in their body later on. So with that in mind, something that can be helpful in identifying emotions is having the vocabulary to describe what you're feeling. So we have these 6 core emotions here. We have happiness, surprise, fear, anger, disgust, sadness. And those, of course, you can feel more things within those categories, but these just give us at least some framework to describe our emotions. You might notice some of the circles are overlapping too, and that's because you can be feeling more than one thing at once. Yeah, and then another thing to keep in mind is we want to try to not label emotions as good or bad, because when we do that, we might instinctually try to rush somebody into feeling good again. And there's kind of a process that they might need to go through before feeling better. And when you rush them, it will kind of invalidate how they're feeling, which is that's the opposite of what acknowledging is trying to do, right? Yeah. And then we wanted to ask you all, what physical changes do you tend to notice when you're experiencing intense feelings? Just so we can get that conversation started. Yeah, so talk amongst yourselves and then we'll come back in a few minutes. I don't think it was like a yeah. The reason I didn't share the last one, I mean, if it's quick, I don't think you not to stress you out. I think you can say it because I'm just like. But also we can maybe like. Okay, let's bring it back to the big group. Does anyone want to share what they talked about with their group? Yeah.
With tingliness and like describing anxiety as like that is like, yeah, pretty spot on. I need to feel that.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Maybe less physical, but more observable, like what you guys were talking about, the social withdrawal. I definitely when I'm on series, like normally I'm a pretty social person, but it's like a noticeable thing to desire.
Of your energy levels.
Yeah, and I think the point that we talked about the point that we talked about in the previous slide about having words to identify our emotions is super important. I think that having a more expansive vocabulary or verbiage to describe the things that we're feeling, especially like when we're feeling some type of way and it makes our bodies have a physical reaction, is really important, because sometimes the depth of the depth of how we connect with our emotions feels limited by the vocabulary that we have. And the more words that we know to describe the things that we're feeling helps us understand ourselves better. Having like this more extended vocabulary and or understanding helps us feel more in tune with like ourselves a bit more. And something that kind of helps me remember that is like, for example, in English, I feel things so deeply and I feel in a range of emotions, but since I don't know very much Spanish, I only know how to be friendly in Spanish. I don't know how to be sad in Spanish or angry in Spanish or super enthusiastic in Spanish because my vocabulary in that language is so limited. And it's like that with English too. And like, yeah, just like the vocabulary that we have about explaining our emotions and communicating our emotions helps us reach new depths of it. So it is really important to be able to identify what we're feeling and having vocabulary for that.
Definitely. All right, well, we're gonna go on to the next letter and ask support. We want you to remember you do not have to be a professional to provide support to a friend. The most important thing to remember is to continue, like we were just talking about, continue validating their emotions, repeating it back to make sure you understand, making sure they're heard there. And then you also want to let that person take the lead in telling you what they need. We have some examples of open-ended questions you could ask, like, what would help you feel more supported right now? Or what's something that's worked for you in the past? This will help you be open to different ways of providing support that are gonna best suit that person. I know sometimes it's tempting to jump in and try to fix somebody's problems for them by providing solutions. And there could be a time for that. You could ask, well, would you like my input? Some things I could think of are blah, blah, blah. But yeah, really letting that person take the lead and telling you what they need is the key to providing support.
So we wanted to ask one last question to open it up to the group, but just to kind of push that point of how we want to show up for people and show that support without maybe trying to fix the problem. I think there are a lot of times when maybe we don't quite know why, but someone tries to support us and it just kind of doesn't hit, like it feels kind of icky, or maybe you feel frustrated or sad or even more isolated, even though the person's reaching out to you. So just in your groups or the people next to you, if you want to try and brainstorm, like, what are some ways, or reflect rather, like ways in the past that someone did try to reach out and help me and like it didn't really feel like support, or I didn't feel open to that. Yeah. No, let me try working on it. Let me try choosing happiness. You're like, oh my god, I did it. It's so tough. Yeah, I don't. Vanquish. I owe it all to you. No. There are ways to say that that aren't like, hey, yeah, because then it's like, oh, you're unhappy, so bring it back. All right, guys, if you could go ahead and start wrapping up those group conversations.
I know, I feel like the stories of when people try to support you and what they said was off-putting, like.
We could say
like, I have a story.
We could say a lot, but yeah.
I wish we could talk about this more, but yeah, wrap up our conversations.
Does anybody have an example that they feel compelled to share with the group, or like one that really stands out to them? Either one that came up for you, or maybe something someone else shared.
Something that we talked about briefly was like, in 2020, I was a senior in high school and I was really not doing well. And I texted my dad like, hey, like, I'm not doing well. And he was like, yeah, have you thought about getting a job and getting your driver's license? Dang. And it just didn't hit. And I know now, like, he means like you need to get out more, but like, it came across bad. So things like that, where it's like, I know my dad like meant well, but it just didn't land.
Yeah, there.
Yeah, it's like pretty much what that is, just in more general sense, like, it can be difficult when somebody expresses emotions, like, and a lot of people, myself included, I do this sometimes, where you, instead of trying to validate the emotions, you just try to solve the problem. And then they almost feel like unheard or unseen in a certain way, it's like, you just ignore the emotions and look at it as like a problem to solve.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah, in those moments, like, your feelings feel like dismissed, and it's like, yeah, dismissive, definitely.
I think I struggle with this a lot, just with my kids too, because sometimes I do take care of things. And so it is difficult not to take on this problem and want to solve it. It's so uncomfortable if they're in pain.
Definitely,
So it, but you know, is there some things like you breathe, count 5, you know, kind of do something not to react immediately, you know, right? Have you helped people who have that difficulty, who actually feel, you know, really uncomfortable when somebody else is having,
Yeah.
Oh.
I think, like, we're talking about a lot of behavioral and conversational skills, but what I find most helpful is to first kind of make that perspective shift within my own head, right? And exactly like you said, sometimes it looks like taking a beat, taking a breath, and just like realigning, like, okay, what do I want to do here? You know, am I uncomfortable because they're uncomfortable, and am I trying to fix that so I can feel more at peace? Or, especially with kids, you know, and teenagers, like, it's hard because a lot of the lived experience we have, we want to just give it to them. But I think unfortunately, a lot of that wisdom does come from like navigating that on your own. And so I would say the most helpful tip for me has been taking a moment within my own head to really ground myself. And I like that you said take a breath. That helps me a lot too. And just be in acceptance, right? Like, we want to be non-judgmental. Sometimes I think I know what you need to do to feel better. But you know, it's one thing to offer your perspective, and I think it's another thing to like engage in solving the problem that can make people feel more anxious or dismissed or isolated. But yeah, it's hard, especially with kids. Thank you for sharing that.
Something that comes up with that question is like, it's like really hard to like not want to like, especially when you're a parent, like not want to like, you want to help your kids and you want to like solve their problems, but something that I have found to be really helpful was when my parents made me feel like I had the space to mess up. Like, my parents kind of like made me feel comfortable like being wrong. Like during those times where like I know my mom is like really resisting the urge to like step in and like do this thing for me, but like that wasn't very helpful in the long run. But like when she like displayed like non-judgmental behaviors, and it made me feel okay, like navigating something that I didn't know how to do or like being wrong. So yeah, just creating a space, a judgment-free space. Yeah.
So that brings us to the last letter in our acronym, which is keep in touch. And I think one of the most helpful things for me to remember about this is like to be specific, right? It's easy to say like, I'll check in with you soon, or like, we should kick it soon, girl, or like something that's more vague time-wise, you know? But when you like set up an actual plan with someone, or even I've literally had friends go through a breakup or maybe something difficult in their life, grieving a loved one, and then I've set in my calendar like a week later a reminder like, hey, text this person, call them, you know, just say what's up, and like keeping those lines of communication open without just being or while keeping in mind like specific times to check in with somebody or make plans with them, you know. I think sometimes, especially when people are depressed or maybe they're a little bit irritable, it's not your first thought to invite them when you're gonna go out or like socialize. But I think little things like that really make people feel like they're a part of a friendship, a part of a community, and it can make a really big difference in them feeling comfortable maybe to reach out for help when they do need it, or just a feeling of like belonging, you know.
I was just talking about that earlier, that sometimes you're not in a space where you kind of isolate when you're going through stuff. But having friends still invite you, even
Yeah.
if you don't go, you still feel like, okay, I'm part of something, even if I emotionally can't make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very warm to like feel considered and feel thought about,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah,
Not forgotten.
not forgotten, or like what you said about being specific, like. When you're making plans, be like, on Wednesday or Friday, do you wanna go to the farmer's market, or do you wanna do this? And kind of setting, when you're presenting plans, setting up like a framework, so it's not just like. You wanna hang out, or we should hang out, it's like. Preventing or providing that framework, it makes it a bit easier to keep in touch.
Yeah, I think lastly too, on that point, like, it goes with the non-judgmental acknowledgement of people's feelings. Like, I know that you might not be as talkative or as energized because of what you're going through, but that doesn't mean like I don't want to be around you, or like you should go isolate in your room, you know, until you come out and you feel better. Like, I think it's another way to show people like, hey, like, I love you, and I care for you, and I'm interested in spending time with you wherever you're at, you know.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, it says avoid vague responses that put the responsibility on them. So, yeah, that's just about being specific and not, yeah, being specific. Yeah, I think that's all we've got. So we have an Active Minds Club that Andrew briefly touched on. And we actually have a table outside with more information too, but it's a club on campus that is aimed at reducing the stigma around mental health. And A.S.K is kind of it's a program that, or a framework that the National Organization of Active Minds developed for Active Minds chapters to share and use to teach people. Yeah. We meet,
Twice a month.
twice a month. We have one more meeting before the end of the school year on May 13th. Next week, yeah. Okay, yeah, May 13th. We're gonna have, a group from Stanford called Good for Media, and it's all about, using social media mindfully in a way that serves you. So, yeah, we're gonna have a guest speaker for that one. It should be really fun. 2 to 3 p.m. Right? Okay. Tuesday. Yeah. Any other questions?
There's a link on Canvas where you can get information about.
We'll send out, I'll be sending out an email with all the presentations, and we'll have all the, a lot of and flyers about it. We also have a QR code at our Active Minds table right outside of the classroom, where you can just scan it if you're interested in joining. It adds you to our email list, and then we send out emails every time we meet.
Hi, everyone. We're gonna introduce our next speaker is Leah Hopkins. She is a registered dietitian specializing in treatment of eating disorders. She has been working with those suffering with eating disorders for over 20 years in hospitals, residential facilities, partial hospitalization, and outpatient treatment centers. Leah has been with Lotus Collaborative for 8 years, and Lotus is actually located in Santa Cruz. So, yeah.
Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about how food can affect mood. And we know we're learning more and more. There are so many ways that food does impact mood. But today we're going to talk about just 2 of the ways. The first one will be a little primer on the gut microbiome, the community that lives within our digestive system. And we'll also be talking about blood sugar regulation. So the gut microbiome, there's more and more research, studies are ongoing and showing how influential this community that lives within us is impactful in, so many aspects of our mental health and as well as our physical health, of course. There was one GI doctor that I heard speaking recently saying that he believed that the gut microbiome was command central for the entire body. So the gut microbiome, this is trillions of microorganisms living within us. They include bacteria, fungi, viruses, and protozoa that colonize the entire GI tract. And these microorganisms communicate with our brain, the central nervous system. This is a bidirectional communication and mostly facilitated through the vagus nerve. So as we can see, the central nervous system processes information from the body and environment that influences and coordinates bodily functions and behaviors. The enteric nervous system, which is the intestine, is considered the second brain, and it has numerous neurons responsible for managing GI motility, secretion of neurotransmitters, synthesis of hormones. In fact, you may be aware that the gut actually synthesizes the majority of serotonin in the body. The gut microbiota, this is the diverse community of microorganisms within the GI tract and is very essential for digestion, nutrient absorption, and immune function. The intestines and the microbiota synthesize and transmit hormones, neurotransmitters. And again, this is through the vagus nerve. And then finally, the gut is really very central in immune function for the entire body. So it's very interesting. Scientists are actually observing that folks with disorders such as depression, anxiety, even autism and post-traumatic stress have altered gut microbiota or have altered gut permeability, altered gut composition. And so there are questions, can we actually treat these disorders by manipulating the microbiome? Perhaps using probiotics to treat certain maladies. So it's just lots and lots of information coming to us now about how important the microbiota is. And then just a few research summaries. Scientists are looking at metabolic health even, such as diabetes, and how folks with diabetes actually exhibit an altered microbiome or microbiota. There are suggested links between the microbiome and neurological diseases, such as Parkinson's disease. Many people who present with Parkinson's disease have actually symptoms of IBS prior to a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. Really interesting. So how do we maintain a healthy gut and balanced brain? Well, firstly, increasing fiber. The American diet is very lacking in fiber, so we recommend increasing fruits, seeds, whole grains, vegetables. There is some research ongoing with supplementation of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids to protect the microbiome and while the body is under stress. Prebiotics are the food, the actual fibers that the microbiota eat, feast on, and thrive on. And so I'm also going to add probiotics here, which can be increased by eating lots of fermented foods, things like kimchi, even yogurt, kefir. Symbiotics typically are in the form of supplementation, and this is the combination of probiotics and prebiotics. And some studies have shown that supplementing with these may reduce symptoms of MDD. And then finally, one of the most interesting to me anyway, is fecal transplants. Has anybody heard of fecal transplants? Yeah. Really, really fascinating. So this is where fecal matter will be transplanted from one individual into another individual. And when the transplant happens, this individual will potentially have relief of symptoms, mood, and other things. So anyway, this is being done in mice, rats, and humans. Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think it's kind of, well, I mean, I would say I don't know the exact form. I mean, I've seen videos of it in like a big injection, you know, a big tube, and so they just kind of implant it. But basically, yes, it's that it goes through the anus. Yeah. Yes. It's a mood disorder. Depression. That type of thing. Yeah. Okay, so the second way that I'll talk about today is how the link between blood sugar or blood glucose control can impact anxiety. And just a reminder, our brains use glucose as their primary source of fuel. So a little refresher course here. We eat food. This raises our glucose or our blood sugar. This will stimulate the pancreas to secrete insulin, which will then help glucose travel through the body into the cell and for fuel or for storage. Have you ever felt hangry? You know what that is? Yeah. So some people might, this is people, you know, when you get really, really hungry, some people might feel like irritable or grumpy. They might feel sick, maybe a little nauseated, feeling a little bit spacey or out of it, and feeling anxious. This is a symptom of hypoglycemia or low blood sugar. So it's very normal when our blood sugar gets low. There is an increase in epinephrine, adrenaline, leads to the fight or flight And the liver responds by releasing stored glucose. And then there's a flood of energy to the entire body and to the heart. And this can lead to sensations associated with anxiety. I often will encourage people to consider physiology when supporting clients or yourself if you're feeling anxious. So question would be, when was the last time you ate? How long has it been? I love this slide. It's a symptom overlap of how the relationship between anxiety and hypoglycemia. So both anxiety and hypoglycemia can manifest in nervousness, rapid heart rate, weakness, lack of energy, poor concentration, shakiness, irritability, sweating. So what causes hypoglycemia? Well, first of all, restriction, low caloric intake or chronic dieting, long periods of time between eating events, physical or mental stress, excessive exercise, inadequate rest, and changes to the physiology. Excessive use of alcohol or other drugs can lower blood sugar. Bariatric surgery, such as gastric bypass, liver dysfunction or liver disease, and certain medications. Something that I'm thinking about recently is this use of the GLP-1 injectables, and could they be causing more anxiety in folks, because they might lead to lower blood sugars? So how do we help stabilize mood with blood sugar? Well, as I mentioned, try not to wait too long between eating events. Make it a goal to eat every 2 to 3 to 4 hours. Be sure that your meals or snacks are nutrient dense. I always like to encourage people to have all the macronutrients in a meal or snack, or at least 2 different macronutrients in a meal and snack. So for instance, protein, carbohydrate, and fat all together. Eating sweets after a meal can really help. Staying hydrated, drinking plenty of water or other fluids, and then getting adequate sleep, a minimum of 7 hours, and get enjoyable and relaxing movement most days. And that's it. Any questions?
After your meal, you mean if you're gonna eat sweets, eat it after a meal, or every meal you should have sweet after?
Oh, good question. Yeah.
Sweets on an empty stomach.
Yeah, the idea is to not have sweets on an empty stomach. Yes.
What do you think would be some good snack choices, like that would have all the macronutrients in them and have fiber and everything?
Yeah. So I would say something like fruit and yogurt, because we've got the probiotics in the yogurt, and then you've got the non-digestible starch or fiber. Bananas and yogurt are perfect, and maybe add some nuts or something. For prebiotics, food. So this would be just, again, the non-digestible fibers, bananas, let's see, what else? I mean, most of the vegetables, asparagus is a good one. So these fibers, we can't really digest in our stomach, but our microbes digest them once they reach the small intestine. And yeah. Yes.
anything fermented does have probiotics?
Yes.
Okay, and then what if it is, pasteurized, does that negate any probiotics?
It can, yes, because of course heat, these are live microorganisms, and so heat is going to destroy them. But if a yogurt or something is pasteurized, sometimes they add the probiotics like lactobacillus back in. And so, yeah, they're present and active. Yes.
It's very subjective, but is there kind of like a supplement that's held in high regard for like a daily supplement or vitamin or anything that we should be taking religiously, just because I'm afraid of like taking like a handful of Skittles of vitamins. Like I just want one or two that can just integrate into my daily life. Is there one that you recommend?
It's a good question. I mean, as a dietitian, I'm gonna say that I rarely recommend supplements. And I just encourage a well-balanced diet with lots of variety, because in that way you're gonna get your micronutrients and macronutrients. You know, if your diet is not sufficient, maybe just a general 1 a day type of multiple vitamin might be okay. You know, there are studies ongoing, supplementing with omega-3 fatty acids if you don't eat fish. But yeah, I'll never forget when I was doing my master's degree, and my professor was teaching the section on vitamins and minerals. Somebody asked him, "Do you take supplements?" And he said, "No, I would never take supplements." Supplements are not regulated. We don't really know that what is in them, what they say is in them is actually in them. They're not regulated by the FDA. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting.
Thank you.
Yes.
Synthetic? You couldn't pronounce synthetic?
So do you mean like natural food supplements?
And synthetic vitamins, well.
Yeah, I mean, the question of vitamins, I am just assuming that they are synthetically produced. But foods, you know, if you have like a food powder, that might be different.
So the food powder is better than more product.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't make any recommendations until I take a look at the product. But there are, like, I know, you know, protein powders or certain vegetable and fruit powders, and these would just be like dehydrated. But of course, when we're thinking about foods and it's put into a different form, what are we missing? We're missing fiber, right? And fiber is what our gut microbiome feeds on, the microbiota. Yes.
I was thinking about what you said about vitamins, like supplements, and how you might recommend like omega-3 if you don't eat fish. I'm vegetarian, and sometimes I don't feel like I get enough like protein, so like I'll take like, I don't get enough iron, so I'll take like an iron
Yes.
supplement.
Yes.
Is that okay?
That absolutely, absolutely. And you know, as if your doctor, if you're shown to be deficient in a certain mineral or vitamin, I think it's very reasonable to be supplementing.
Yeah.
And testing, you know, on a regular every 6 months or something to see if what you're taking is actually giving you the result that you are needing.
And like kind of like using it, like, in addition to trying to get more iron from food, but like, I do find it to be a little bit helpful to like, combine the two, like with like food and like real things, and then like something that once a day.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people are now being tested for their vitamin D levels, and the doctors are recommending supplementing with vitamin D. You know, but again, if you're shown to be deficient, absolutely supplementation is perfect. In general, though, I like to tell people to eat food. Thank you so much.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for being at the conference. I hope that you're enjoying it and getting as much out of it as I have. Today has been pretty special, and I wanted another shout out to all the students who have been planning this and working towards this and presenting, and to Claudia, who, you know, spearheads the technology and the organization and implementation. So shout out to the team. I have the privilege of introducing NAMI and Mikey. NAMI, Santa Cruz County is an outstanding, NAMI is a national organization, and their local chapter is very active in the county. So no, you'll be able to read that, and I'm just going to share a little bit about NAMI in terms of what they do and how they do it. People with they host wonderful trainings for providers, for family members, for individuals who have a mental health condition, who are suffering from maybe mental illness, or know someone who is. So for friends, there's a great support group for friends and family members and providers, and so much more. So there's support, there's education, there's connection, and our NAMI in Santa Cruz is really active, and it's all, they're not providing like clinical counseling or diagnosis. They're really providing connection and support and resources. And so I have the pleasure of introducing Mikey today, and he's going to talk a little bit about his lived experience. And I'm going to flip the paper over, see if I can actually read this. Lucinda wasn't able to attend today. And you saw, she prepared some of the slides, which you're looking at. And you'll hear directly from, oh, there's your name, sorry. From Michael Chapman, who goes by Mikey, and Mikey will tell you his story. And we really want to thank you for being here, and appreciate you for being here.
That's wrong.
Thank you, Mikey. Appreciate you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael. I'm 30 years old. I currently live in SoCal. I really enjoy going to the gym, where I play ping pong, basketball, and lift weights. Also, going to the ocean is one of my favorite things to do. Swimming in the ocean, no wetsuit or anything, because the cold gets my mind off things. I'm really into horror movies, actually. I have like a giant shelf just full of from the 1920s to now. And my favorite movie is Evil Dead 2. Have any of you guys seen that?
What is it?
Evil Dead 2? No. It's a horror comedy. Anyways, my favorite TV shows are Big Mouth, The Mighty Boosh, and The Simpsons. I'm also running the music. I play piano, bass, drums, and a little bit of ukulele. I've made 4 Halloween albums where I take horror movie songs, put my own twists in them. Currently, as a part-time job, I'm working for a renowned chef from Austria, and I'm on the prep cook, so I'm like the chopping, the dicing. And I got over my fear of flying. Last year I went to Hawaii and New Zealand. And this year, I'm gonna hopefully visit my brother in Australia. I also found that reading is very helpful for my mental health. I currently finished all the Harry Potter books. And also, sometimes on weekends I play Texas Hold'em with my friends. And yeah, my favorite places to go are the forest and the ocean. So Before I began experiencing symptoms of my mental health issues, I was a really happy kid. I did really well in school. And it wasn't until I had warning signs when I was in 5th grade. I began to experience severe anxiety and depression. And I pretty much just stayed home from school the whole time. And on occasions I did go to school, I'd just go to the office and say, I'm running a fever, I'm sick, and they take me home. I always had like this fear of people yelling at me. I had this thing where I'd be afraid to do something, I'm afraid someone's gonna yell at me or something. And I finally got back to school and a teacher like went off on me for some reason because I didn't understand what was going on in class. And this deepened my depression. During this time, I began seeing a therapist, which was helpful. And also I had a long-term substitute teacher that was very helpful too. By the time I got to 6th grade was actually really good. I did really well in school. I made a lot of friends. It wasn't until 7th grade when my depression returned, I started smoking pot. I just want to say I'm not anti-pot at all, but for me, it doesn't work for me. Yeah, during 7th grade, my depression returned. By the time I got to 8th grade, I was smoking pot every day. And I began seeing the counselor again. During this time, I began to experience psychosis, which for me included a constant voice in my head and visual hallucinations. When I first started hearing the voice in my head, it kind of sounded like how I imagined my own voice would sound in my late 20s. And then have you guys seen the movie Donnie Darko? Yes? It's a good movie, right? Yeah. Well, I watched that movie several times, and the voice in my head became the voice of Frank the Rabbit, one of the characters from the movie. One of the first psychosis I remember experiencing is I was in my parents' bedroom, and I heard a snake rattling its tail and hissing. I kept telling my mom, and she kept saying, it's just the wind, it's just the wind. I knew that there was something wrong. That same day, I was looking in the mirror, and my eyes were gone, my eyes were ripped out. There were times where I didn't know if I was dreaming or awake. The voice in my head was telling me to hurt myself. I didn't think there was a point of living, and I didn't think I was going to live to be 18 years old. And during this time, I did attempt suicide. During this time also, twice when I was 14 years old, and twice when I was 15 years old, I went to a psychiatric adolescent hospital. And for about 2 weeks each time. When I first started experiencing these symptoms, I knew that there was something wrong. And once my parents began to understand what was going on, they became my biggest support system. I began seeing a psychiatrist where I was diagnosed bipolar 1 with psychotic features and chronic anxiety. Yeah, like once I saw a psychiatrist and got a diagnosis, it all began to make sense to me. Once I found the right medication, most of my voices stopped. I still deal with psychosis now. Well, not right now, but like during my life now. And during this time, I had a lot of friends that were supportive. I had other friends that were not supportive. I had friends that kind of disappeared from my social life because they were freaked out by my mental illness. But I did have good friends that were not judgmental, and they'd come to my house and visit me and hang out with me, and they didn't have any judgment. I tried to go back to regular high school, but they didn't have the support system I needed. Once I was able to go to a charter high school, I was able to stay in school and I was able to graduate. The teachers there were so supportive, and it was really great. I guess a part of my recovery has been having a good relationship with my family. I know a lot of people can relate to having a lot of anxiety problems during the pandemic. And yeah, all these things are the reason why I'm telling my story and why I like to end the silence. And that's it. I'm open to questions. Anyone has any questions? Anyone have a question? Yeah.
What year were you diagnosed?
What year? 2008. November of 2008. Yeah?
What would you say helped you most in school?
In school? Having teachers that were really supportive, like counselor and stuff. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah,
There's sometimes psychosis gets like really bad, if you're like experiencing, like if you're like really low, is your psychosis kind of peak? Or does your medication kind of just like stabilize it?
let's see. Well, my psychosis can sometimes be triggered by things too, like stressful event or something. Like something, or maybe something really bad happens, I'll start hearing voices, but I don't really hear voices much anymore. But it's mostly from, I have chronic anxiety, so I kind of worry about like everything. But it's weird, because I have chronic anxiety, I worry about everything, but I can still speak in front of people, and it's like, doesn't make me anxious at all. Kind of weird. Any other questions? Yeah.
I guess like, I would say I have like an internal dialogue, but it kind of like, it's persistent throughout like anything I do, like when I'm like tired, it's mostly apparent. But, would you say that's like a similar thing, or is it like completely different, just having like an internal dialogue rather than like hearing voices, or is that like pretty much the same thing?
Well, there's like kind of two kinds of hearing voices. There's the voices that you hear out loud, and then there's the kind of, I mean, you might argue with me on this, but like a lot of other people that deal with just voices like in their head, but they're like so uncontrolled and like not you. I mean, it's you, like, you know what I mean? Like it's like you're not hearing it out loud, but you're hearing in your head, and it's involuntary thoughts and stuff. That's definitely.
Would it be out loud?
Huh?
For you, would you hear your voices out loud?
I think when I first started having symptoms, I did, but like later on now, if I hear voices, it's usually just my head.
I see, okay.
Any questions? Cool. Well, thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you so much.
And having the courage to share our diagnosis, helps reduce the stigma, helps connect us to one another and get the help that we need. And so I really want to thank you for letting us know your story and sharing your experience, and encourage all of you to share your story, to find someone, to find a place. NAMI's programs are wonderful for supporters, and they're great resources, but also like we've in these last hours to the days, including yesterday, we've created a community hopefully where we can make it okay to talk about our life and to talk about our experience and reduce that stigma and really increase the kindness and the compassion and the community, so that we can heal together and do things together and still have joy. And that's, again, one of the beauties of, I think, of NAMI and the work that they're doing in our community, of Active Minds Club, of Student Health Services, and of each one of us as individuals, of like creating that community that we're wanting and creating that support.
I just want to say, like, you asked me when I got my diagnosis. Actually, I had my first psychotic break in November of 2008. I think I got diagnosed until maybe December or January. So I would say that.
It does, and that's another thing, just in general, it takes a little time sometimes to sort out, is it this or is it that? And because so many factors, like, is it loss of sleep? Is it, is it a medical, like what's happening? And so sometimes reaching a diagnosis can take a long time. And that's another thing that in the classes that NAMI offers, that they teach about and families help explain that process. So, because it's all can be very daunting and scary, not just for the individual, but for their support system. So really addressing and supporting both is important.
And also, a lot of people may get diagnosed, they have a lot of different diagnoses. Like, I know I have friends that have been diagnosed with like bipolar, schizophrenia, schizoaffective. I was first diagnosed schizoaffective, they thought maybe I had schizophrenia, but I usually go by bipolar, psychotic features, and chronic anxiety. It's like the, I feel like it makes sense. My last diagnosis,
Yeah. So again, just a reminder, there's a QR code, I think it's still up, for mental health first aid, where we talk a little bit about different diagnoses and really focus on
algae, like how you can support somebody who's having a potential crisis or experiencing something. And so if you'd like to sign up for that, it's free. It's coming up on Friday, the 16th. There's some pre-work because it's not all in person. Part of it, it's a hybrid, so like 2 hours is online and the rest of it is in person on Friday. And Katie and I are the instructors. So I think this, any questions or comments? I think, oh yes.
A.S.K, last year. And you did a really good job this year.
Thank you. That's what I was gonna sort of close with is maybe 1 or 2 words, about together and like, and just maybe what you'll do today to support your thriving, to support your self-compassion, to support your community, to support your connection. And if you all don't mind, that'll be sort of our ticket out. And again, I want to thank everyone who worked towards making today happen, and especially all of you for being here online and in person and sitting on. So if anyone's willing to kind of share what they might, a little something about driving it.
I'm gonna say compassion because it applies to self and it applies to us. And it's about thriving.
Thank you.
Something that I think was relevant with the conversations we had with others last night in Watsonville and throughout today was the importance of slowing down. And like, I think when you slow down, you are, when you slow down, you are making space for other people. And instead of like slowing down, like, I guess, first with ourselves, like slowing down with ourselves to like identify the emotion, to understand it better, and like taking like the moment to do that. And then like when you engage with other people, slowing down to like understand what they're saying a little bit more and resisting the urge to respond, you know what I mean? Like, what's this or yeah, like trying to be more present and like slowing down to be more present and or slowing down to be more present and like knowing what follow-up question to ask instead of just being a little bit dismissive because you're kind of moving a little bit too fast.
Thank you. And when we slow down, sometimes the question comes, like we don't need to worry about the question. It's next, we can just be. And like there's something really special about being. You know, I think that's one of the things that stood out for me was like in the dancing and just being in that rhythm and feeling the drum and being on the ground and learning these steps and moving my body and, you know, with other people and holding their hands and like just, right? When we slow down, we can speed up, like we can be flexible, right? Like it's I can be really hot.
Today and yesterday was like the importance of taking care of ourselves so that we could sustain like helping other people as well. One of the phrases from the first essential the report mentioned community is an antidote to burnout. But just finding different ways to like find community, whether it be participating in second events or you know volunteer putting that out.
Thank you for sharing, because it's not easy to public speak. I was even getting nervous just talking right now, so, and I didn't share, so thank you very much, because I think speaking like with honesty and just being authentic is very healing to show the people you can be, and it's okay to have the mix match of whatever that is. And I guess taking from this too, sometimes for me, it's hard, like, being uncomfortable in silence and sometimes just letting it be instead of having to build a space and just creating a safe space. So that's also too, how to feel somebody can come to you and feel safe and be approachable, like the same way I want somebody was helping me. And I'm thankful because I was having a challenging day. And so coming in and being able to just kind of be in the moment and together being present, kind of learning ways to be compassionate toward myself has been very it's been very nice and very helpful. And I think too, just identifying what it is instead of it being this
ambiguous, unknown kind of, feeling or thought, I liked your tip on writing it on a sticky note, because sometimes filling the whole pages and they can be a little daunting, and you're like, oh geez, like, of course I probably can do a whole few pages, but what can I kind of just get out in the moment? And then, so it's not just stuck in your head.
Yeah, and like, we thrive, like, when we feel safe, we're like setting ourselves up for thriving, right? When we write something down, like we're starting to chart the course, and like when it's all up here, yeah, cool. So like getting it on paper can be a really great first start. And even today, those of you who want to share and get it out that way, but if not, like take a minute and like put it in your notes and like, what are some of the things, the one-liners that I want to remember, or the reminders, right, from today.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, please.
I just think you guys are awesome, because I'm used to speaking like freshman classes at high schools. And sometimes they're not as engaging, or they only ask questions and they don't really get involved. So you guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I just want to be sure if anyone else wants to share, otherwise like ending on you are awesome, but like, yeah, we are.